A few years ago, the city of St. Paul, Minnesota passed one of the most strict rent control laws in the entire country that capped rents at 3% for all properties, single family and large multifamily, no matter when they were built. But you know what happened? Development stopped. And now they're trying to modify that law so that development will start up again. The problem is, it won't work. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. Alright, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's an update to a story that I've been covering for a couple years now, and it has to do with the rent control law in St. Paul, Minnesota. So, as I've mentioned many times before, it's an awful law. It's absolutely terrible. It destroyed development within the city. It made a lot of people who were landlords already want to quit being landlords, and they've already modified the plan one time because it was absolutely unworkable. Okay, so basically it set rents at a 3% cap for all properties, regardless of new development, old development, single family, multifamily. It didn't matter. And it would hurt landlords a great deal over a long period of time. So they were trying to figure out, how can we adjust this law so that it is actually manageable? Okay, it's manageable and it's still in place. The best thing they could have done is said, hey, we're gonna throw this law completely out because this is garbage. It does not work. It's hurting our city. But no, they're not gonna do that. Okay, the place is too far gone to the left. They are now, diving into the realm of communism with this nonsense. So the mayor, who actually is pretty progressive, even realized, hey, we need to get development rolling in the city again. So the most recent change proposed for this law is that they want to put a set date cap on when how new the units can be that are under the rent control policy, and they want that to be back 20 years. So any building built before 2005 would be stuck under these rent control policies, and any building built after 2005 would be exempt from the rent control policies. And they think, hey, this is going to help out with this whole issue. My problem, of course, being that a lot of the small mom and pop landlords, such as myself, would be stuck under these policies, while big developers who own newer properties would basically, they get all the benefits. So you would be hurting small mom and pop landlords who, should I mention, we provide the great bulk of affordable housing. They'd be hurting us, and then giving the large corporate landlords who build those giant new apartment buildings, they'd be the ones who get to charge whatever rents they want. Oh yeah, that seems like a great plan. Now, obviously the solution to this isn't to switch things around or exempt small mom and pop landlords. It's to get rid of rent control altogether. So yeah, before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. So do you think that changes to these rent control laws for St. Paul, Minnesota are actually going to have an impact and cause developers to want to come in there and start building again? I personally don't. I know they have a lot of other issues, and you know what? Developers can say, hey, we're going to build in Minneapolis, which is right next door. We're going to build in any of the suburbs or any of the other counties and not have to deal with any rent control whatsoever. So why in the world would you want to build in St. Paul and have to face even, the possibility of a rent control policy going against you? You wouldn't. You would just say, hey, I'm just going to build over here instead. That's the way I see it. So they've hurt themselves by putting this policy into place. And you know what? You get what you deserve. You get what you deserve. Sometimes it takes a slap in the face before you realize that, hey, maybe that wasn't a good idea after all. Anyway, let's get into the article. This article is coming from the Minnesota Post, and it says, subtle change to St. Paul's new rent control proposal sets firm exemption cutoff date. Hopes to boost housing. Let's get into it. At his annual budget address last week at St. Paul's Ordway Theater, Mayor Melvin Carter laid out his proposal for the city's $855 million annual spending plan, suggesting a property tax levy increase of around 8%, Interspersed with the budget details and after a long list of progressive housing policy ideas was the big announcement: another change to the city's unique rent stabilization ordinance. So yeah, they want to make a modification to the rent stabilization ordinance, but pay attention to what I just said in the first paragraph. The other thing they mentioned was, hey, we want to increase property taxes for the city by 8%. Funny how the increase in the rents that you can charge doesn't equal the amount that they increase the property taxes. Isn't that hilarious how that works? So here you are expected to keep paying those taxes, but they won't let you raise your rents. Seems like a typical government response. It's a new twist in a story that's been unfolding for 4 years about whether the rent stabilization ordinance should make exceptions for newly constructed buildings. The new tweak changes that policy detail, removing a rolling 20-year window and replacing it with a hard cutoff date of December 31st, 2004. Any housing built after that date would be exempt from the rent control ordinance. Describing the city's housing shortage in his budget address, the mayor argued that the policy is a simple change that would unlock the critical release valve that only new housing construction can offer us. Yeah, the city, like most cities, does need additional units. But as I mentioned before, it doesn't help the residents of the city if they build a whole bunch of new housing and it's all like luxury, very expensive housing. It doesn't. The residents need more affordable housing. And how do you get more affordable housing? Usually older apartment units it's what becomes affordable housing. Okay, so we're talking about buildings built in the 80s, the 70s, and before that. Okay, and small landlords such as myself, because those buildings are less expensive, we end up buying them. Unfortunately, if we're under a rent control policy that doesn't allow us to raise the rents in order to keep up with the higher maintenance costs and the higher tenant turnover because you're dealing with lower income tenants, well, it makes it so that we don't even want to do it. We don't want to buy those properties. We don't want to have to deal with the city. And me personally, I would just invest somewhere else. I wouldn't invest in Minnesota at all because you know what? Minnesota scares me. It scares me how far left it has gone. We saw the city of Minneapolis burning down in riots in the year 2020. I don't want to see my building on fire and the police doing nothing because the mayor and the governor don't believe that they should stop rioters. That's ridiculous. Okay, so you know what? I'm going to invest somewhere else. I can tell you for a fact in 2020 here in Omaha, Nebraska, I know the police was shutting down those protesters. I know it. Okay. Left unsaid in Mayor Carter's speech was that the previous rent control compromise, the 20-year exemption window instituted in 2022, did not go far enough to undo disincentives to building housing. As I explained at the time, the original voter-approved policy did not include such an exception, making St. Paul's ordinance unique in North America and raising red flags with policy experts. This is why the mayor and city council tweaked the ordinance in late 2022 to add a rolling new construction exemption, providing new buildings with a 20-year window whereby they could move rents to match market conditions. So basically, with the rolling window, for the first 20 years of a building's existence, it would be exempt from rent control, and then it would fall under rent control policies. And they realized this wasn't workable. This wasn't going to incentivize a lot of people to want to invest and build new properties in the city. So they think that this new thing where, hey, this hard cutoff date of 2004, that's going to work. That's going to make things better. The problem is, St. Paul, Minnesota is not New York. It's not. It's not Los Angeles. It's not some high demand place. And there are other options for developers, for landlords to build and to rent out properties. So what I see happening is just stagnation, slowly dying cities. You know what? Maybe that's what needs to happen. Maybe people need to wake up to the realities behind these laws and realize, hey, they're toxic. They don't work. We need examples showing people this stuff. Otherwise, places like, Omaha, Nebraska, where I live, where I invest, they might fall for the hype behind rent control policies and believe that it might actually work. But now, guess what? We get to look up at St. Paul and say, yeah, we're not doing that nonsense.